Apologies if I haven't shaved for this video. I'm growing my NASCAR playoff beard. Hey! Welcome to the IndyCar Red Pill, the show where we talk about IndyCar racing, no punches pulled and no filter. And it's been 2 weeks since the first practice session at Watkins Glen, so I figured let's talk briefly about Watkins Glen. I was lucky enough to attend the Watkins Glen Grand Prix, and a wild weekend of weather and cold temperatures boiled down to this. Alexander Rossi established himself as a star in the sport. Now, some people will say, well, he won the Indy 500. Doesn't that make him a star? Kind of. This was an establishing moment, though. This was pretty much right down to Rossi's driving ability, not strategy, not outright car pace, just Alexander Rossi winning, going out there and winning a race. Now, there was some strategy. There was what seemed to be a BS yellow, but ultimately was just a miscommunication in race control with Takuma Sato spinning, which looked like a engine blow up. But when you see a Honda with smoke coming out of the back of it in the year 2017, generally you want to err on the side of caution. Wow, that was a good pun, wasn't it? But anyway, I would just like to say that we've seen two people establish themselves, really stand out and establish themselves as stars this year. Joseph Newgarden and Alexander Rossi in terms of the young talent. And both of them kind of did it by beating Scott Dixon. It seems like Scott Dixon is the crucible that young racing drivers in IndyCar need to overcome to establish their own star. And Rossi beat Dixon in a straight-up fight at what really, let's face it, is Dixon's track in Watkins Glen, New York. I mean, there are a few tracks, maybe Mid-Ohio, but there are a few tracks where Scott Dixon is more dominant, and there's almost a more, bet on red thing when you, well, I guess it's bet on chrome blue now that Dixon's out of red. But anyway, it's just there's less of a sure bet. Or you're not going to find a lot of places that are more of a sure bet than going to Watkins Glen and putting all your money on Scott Dixon, and he lost this time to Alexander Rossi. So it's I'm excited to see next year. Rossi also re-signed a contract with Andretti Autosport and Napa, so that's very promising for the future of the sport. A big company where people can actually buy things. You can't really buy things at NTT Data now, can you? But it's good to see companies that can actually connect to the fans, like Napa, sticking around where, again, we as fans can go support those businesses. I mean, that's very important. I mean, NASCAR has, as the other example of the big motor racing in the United States, has kind of built their empire based on companies that are supporting the sport, where the fans then can go out and buy the stuff that's supporting their driver on Monday. So very promising news pretty much all around out of the Watkins Glen weekend, except for a man that I mentioned earlier in this video by the name of Joseph Newgarden. Now, if you saw his crash, you probably saw me on TV along with a bunch of my friends because we were all standing right in front when Newgarden crashed coming out of the pit lane. It looked like he was racing power coming out of the pits and just got it a little wrong, smacked the outside wall, and then got smacked in the rear end by Sebastian Bourdais, and then Tony Kanaan also put it in the wall, but not a lot of people paid attention to that. I will say it was very reminiscent of another Penske driver who looked like he was on top of the world and lost a championship in a very similar way, and that was Ryan Briscoe.
Oh, you can't believe it!
He hit the inside wall coming out.
And he didn't rush it. He hit the wall enough. I mean, he tried to light it up leaving the box. The car shot left. He took out the timing stand and then got into the wall. Oh, he was just given a gift.
And this car, if this car's damaged, he just threw that thing away.
Now, a lot of people don't remember this because 2009 was a very down year for IndyCar. Nobody was really paying attention. Nobody really cared. But Ryan Briscoe was leading the championship in that season. And going into the round at Motegi, which was just before the round, the season finale at Homestead, don't you wish the IndyCar series still ended on an oval? I certainly do. But he crashed coming out of the pit lane while leading the race. Very similar situation to Joseph Newgarden, again with a big points lead. And Briscoe would eventually lose the championship to Dario Franchitti, a Ganassi driver. So we've got pretty much the same situation going into the Sonoma finale, in which Joseph Newgarden has a 1-point advantage over Scott Dixon. And unfortunately, this is where we get into something that I feel I need to talk about right off the bat, which is the double points, which also puts into contention Helio Castroneves, Simon Pagenaud, Will Power, Graham Rahal, and Alexander Rossi for championship contention. Now, Rahal and Rossi, those guys will be eliminated the moment Joseph Newgarden takes the green flag, assuming Newgarden takes the green flag or doesn't end up like Dan Weldon did in 2010 at Sonoma and on his lid before the race even starts. You've got 3 potential spoilers in the championship. But to be honest, at this point in the season, if Pagenaud, Power, or even Castroneves, who I think you could make a case for that he's still a worthy champion, if any of those 3 end up winning the championship because of double points, it's a bit of a farce. And by a bit of a farce, I mean a big, big farce. Because for my money, there's been 2 dominant drivers this season, Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden. And if one of them doesn't win the championship, it's very unfortunate because they've just been the best all year. And again, you know, IndyCar doesn't need a chase. They don't need a double points thing. Again, it came down. The championship is coming down once again to the 2 lead drivers separated by a single championship point. The series does not need any gimmicks when it comes to the championship. I'm really seriously hoping that the double points are eliminated entirely next year because, frankly, it's not needed anymore. It was never needed in the first place. Maybe you could have argued last year when Simon Pagenaud probably would have had the championship wrapped up before Homestead. Homestead. Where am I living? But before Sonoma. But, you know, that is 1 year out of the last 12, 13 years at this point where the IRL IndyCar series, whatever you want to call it, because it was IRL that far back, it has come down to the last race every single year. Every single year, it has come down to the last race. And only the last few years has there been double points involved. Again, it's not necessary. It's just not necessary, and it potentially is going to give somebody a championship that they didn't necessarily earn over the course of the year. They may earn it because, for whatever reason, one of the classic Sonoma first turn pileups happens, and it takes both Dixon and Newgarden out of the race, and then Castroneves or Pagenaud or Power just cruises to a championship. Yeah, man, I don't like the idea of that. I mean, that's the same kind of thing in the chase. I brought up the Kyle Busch example last week. It's that kind of thing that really sullies what it means to be a champion. You know, that's why, you know, not to talk too much NASCAR, but I will say the reason Jimmy Johnson doesn't get the recognition he probably deserves in NASCAR is because all of his championships came under the chase format. I mean, when you have the perception that things are too random, you know, there's a difference between unpredictability and random. And when you put double points into it, or you put a chase format, you know, to go that far, and I'm looking at you too, NHRA, don't think you're out of the woods here. When you put those variables in there and you add randomness, not unpredictability, then you've got a problem. And so IndyCar is teetering on the edge of having a random championship winner rather than an unexpected championship winner. Because if Dixon wins it, he's kind of coming from behind. He's behind the 8 ball because, of course, the Honda Aero kit has supposedly been inefficient compared to the Chevrolet. We didn't see that at Watkins Glen, did we? We haven't seen that. We didn't really see that at Gateway. We haven't seen that at Road America. There's quite a few tracks where it was like, oh, the Hondas are out to lunch, and then they really weren't. But theoretically, on paper, Dixon has had a disadvantage all year. He had a pretty terrible Indianapolis 500, obviously, because of the double points. He was saved because of the fact that he won the pole in the points. And then also Newgarden had a pretty bad day at Indianapolis, though not quite as bad as Dixon. But it's a come-from-behind thing, an unexpected result if DIXON manages to overcome the Penske juggernaut and win a championship. But again, if Will Power wins it, then we've got a problem, if that makes sense. Another point I wanted to bring up is the fact that I've never been a fan of Sonoma as the championship decider. If it were up to me, the Indy cars would be at Homestead. They would be at Fontana. Heck, I would move. Actually, probably the cheapest and most efficient way to do this is move the Grand Prix of Indianapolis from the beginning of May, where I feel like it's now boring. It's pretty pointless in that spot. I personally, and this is somebody who's a Gomer pretty much. I mean, it's like, nobody cares about the Grand Prix of Indianapolis anymore. I mean, it was a novelty the first year. Maybe you could argue the second year. By the third and fourth year, nobody cares anymore. So what I would do is, if you really want to be cheap, move that race and make it the season finale. End the season at Indianapolis. A mid-September race. Indy, as far as I'm aware, is still, it has always been good weather-wise in September. So that's what I would do, but preferably I would end it at Fontana or Homestead or some oval, because I think oval racing generally lends itself to more exciting championship battles. I mean, just look at 2008 Chicagoland for an example of that, where the championship, or 2007. I mean, both of those years at Chicagoland, the championship came down to the last corner, whether or not, which way it was decided. Or even going further back, you could go to Texas 2002, where literally, again, it was Castroneves and Hornish going across the line side by side for the championship. So, and even in the kart days, you look at Fontana 1999, where it was a battle between Juan Pablo Montoya and Dario Franchitti, and they actually ended up tying on points there. So, it's just, and I understand why Sonoma, it has kind of fallen into the spot that it has as the championship finale. The big tech companies that are now kind of, like the NTT Datas of the world, really like Sonoma because, it's Silicon Valley and all this, tech, business-to-business, boring nonsense. A lot of suites and what corporate suites are sold at that race. But, as a fan, it's just not very exciting of a race. So, if this isn't an exciting race, I won't be at all surprised. I'm crossing my fingers, but I can't remember the last time I was truly interested in the Sonoma race. Maybe 2014, I think that was, when Ray Hall was leading, and then he, ran off the track because he was getting yelled at by his dad, which was kind of funny, but at the same time kind of sad. Speaking of the Ray Hall team, they've got an additional driver this weekend, Zachary Clayman DeMello, who should really spit out his gum during interviews, by the way.
Gum chewing's fine when it's once in a while. It stops you from smoking and brightens your smile. But it's repulsive, revolting, and wrong. Chewing and chewing all day long.
Just a little word of advice for Mr. Clayman DeMello. It's always good to have new additional cars on the grid. I think Schmidt's supposedly going to enter another car. They're not on the spotters guide. They're not on the entry list for Juan Pablo Garcia. We'll see if that materializes, and then it'll be 23 cars, which is, I think, the biggest grid outside of Indianapolis this year. So that's cool. In terms of the race, how I think Sonoma is going to play out is you've got, I do think the odds favor DIXON. Not only because it's a 1-point championship swing, and really all DIXON has to do is finish ahead of Newgarden to take the championship, but because of the fact of the double points and the fact that all of the Penske drivers outside of Newgarden are involved in the championship, that's going to hurt Newgarden because nobody's going to be a team player when they have a potential to win the championship. I mean, again, look at 2015, how the Penske team fell apart when Will Power and Juan Pablo Montoya got into each other because both of them were racing for the championship and they crashed off of each other. That gave the championship on a silver platter to DIXON. So I could see something like that happening again, where you've doubled the amount of Penske cars going for the championship, all four of them. Obviously, Elio's very motivated because if he wins the championship, Roger's not going to ship him off to sports cars. He'll hire Jensen Button. He may end up hiring Jensen Button anyway for that sports car program, just FYI. But you've got... I can't see the Penske... I mean, unless here's the one thing that will save Newgarden. If Newgarden goes out there and sets the pole position, he sets a track record, gets on the pole position, and hopefully somebody gets on the outside of the front row that's not in the championship hunt, like a Ryan Hunter-Reay or a Takuma Sato or somebody like that, and Newgarden just gaps him on the start, and the race goes caution-free, and Newgarden just pulls away and dominates the race. I think that's the only way I see Newgarden winning the championship. If it's a fight between the Penske's, I think there's going to be contact. I think there's going to be problems, especially if it's with Pagenaud. I think Pagenaud remembers that Gateway race. He doesn't have a point cushion now. DIXON, I think, will end up winning the championship. As much as I'd like to see a young American star driving for Penske in his first year take the championship, it's just not looking like it's going to. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if it happens. But, man, you don't bet against Scott Dixon going into the last race. Assuming all the mechanical stuff holds together, assuming the car is on pace, and also assuming that his teammates play nice with it. I mean, that's another thing. All three of them are pretty much confirmed that they're not going to be at Ganassi next year. That seat's going to go to Brendan Hartley, the recently estranged Porsche LMP1 driver. So that is going to be an interesting factor as well, is how nice the Ganassi team plays with Dixon. You would think the way that Dixon has been a good teammate, at least to Kanaan, probably to Kimball, and even possibly to Chilton, because I know Chilton is pretty good buddies with Dario Franchitti, and then Franchitti is good buddies with Dixon, so you would assume there's some mutual respect. So I would say that the Ganassi team is going to be very nice to Dixon, and all the Honda teams are going to be very nice to Dixon. Can you say the same thing for Ed Carpenter Racing or AJ Foyt Racing? Are they going to be nice to Penske? Are they going to be even near the front to battle with Penske? Very hard to say, but I would say unlikely. Fast road courses have not suited the Foyt team, and they haven't suited the Ed Carpenter Racing team. So I think from the Chevy contingent, you've only got the Penske team, and they're going to be all fighting each other. So in terms of a championship, you gotta think that it's going to be Scott Dixon. So we'll reconvene when the IndyCar finale has taken place. And next week, you notice maybe my Lazier Racing logo moved from my hat to my shirt. Wonder where it's going to be next week. Tune in to find out. But yeah, there's going to be lots to discuss, I'm sure, coming out of the Sonoma race. Thank you guys so much for watching the IndyCar Red Pill all season long. I'm also planning to do some stuff during the off-season IndyCar related, so don't worry, it's not going to turn into a complete NASCAR Heat channel over the winter. I've got a few plans, big plans, for some IndyCar-themed content coming during the off-season, which is like 6 months, so, just I'm hanging the rope as we speak. But we will see you to discuss everything that happened and even maybe give you a season review in the next episode of the IndyCar Red Pill. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below and leave a like on this video if you enjoy IndyCar racing content. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Get the focus on the Smithfield, and we'll see you in the next video.